Welcome to Storytime, where I'm going to tell stories and anecdotes about things that have happened mostly around the US pump community, just sort of generally relating to the game. A couple of caveats before we get started. All of these are told either from my perspective or from that of my guests, and we are inherently biased. As much as possible, I'm trying to get some other sources to try and verify what I remember, but in some cases this is just going to be from my recollection, and I'm going to make it as close to accurate as possible. So sit back, grab a drink, and let's get into today's story. So today I want to talk about the USPF that was won by an almost completely unknown player. So almost 10 years ago, pretty much exactly, about 50 people descended on the Genesis arcade in Las Vegas with the hopes of the biggest thing you could do in Pump It Up esports at the time, trying to win the USPF and gain yourself entry into the 2011 World Pump Fest, which would be held later that year in Guangzhou, China. Pretty much most of the well-known names within the community showed up. You had heavy favorite Sikraken was absolutely there. There's a guy named Dan Period, if I remember properly. I seem to remember he was a machine owner from the Northeast somewhere. I think I had played with him in New Jersey, but I don't know necessarily if he was from there. Perennial threat to come through and take it, we had Chadley, and then community stalwarts at the time, Hellacious, Boss Phil, since I can't call him by what he went by at the time, we're going to go with Boss Phil, and people that would later come to be community stalwarts. Angel Who was there, Cesar Lara was there. I went back to try and verify some of my memory of this event, and the best thing I could find to try and remember all of it were actually very high quality videos at the time that were taken by Darklink87. So definitely big shout outs to Darklink for just having those videos up on the internet. They are extremely helpful for trying to find stuff about this event. And it wasn't all just speed, right? We did have people coming in for freestyle. Brian Ho had been around the community even longer than I had, and he was there once again to try and find a spot at WPF. Again, favorite Shionian Archie was there. I think this is actually the only time I was ever in the same room at the same time as Archie, but we had both been around the community for a pretty long time at that point. It's really weird that this is the only time, I think, that we actually met. And Women's Speed, of course, was going on as well. Hurt Piggy Pig was there for her constant domination of Women's Speed in the US. Local multi-game arrow enthusiast Joker, I seem to remember, was there to try and take it off of her. And then, looking around, there was a guy named Diego that I have never heard of before, since. I've never heard of him any other time. I have no idea who he was. I have no idea where he was from, but he had a really, really strong performance in this tournament. So I really apologize. If anybody has played with that guy or knows who he was, that would be extremely helpful, because this is the only evidence I have that he was ever anywhere, and he does extremely well in this tournament. And then sort of buried in the middle of all of that, we have a mystery challenger. We have another person that just has nothing to do with any of it and just shows up to play some Pump. And we'll get back to him later. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, tens of thousands of people descend on Las Vegas with a much bigger venue. They're going to the Rio, and a much bigger dream, because the 2011 World Series of Poker was going on over there. And among the many people that came to try and participate in the World Series of Poker with the dream of making a bunch of money was one very retired, very not active in Pump, J-Boy. So, I knew the USPF was happening, right? But I was not really intending to go and be a serious threat. I wanted to just show up. The last time the USPF had been held that I knew of, I won it. Right? So this was me saying, okay, I haven't played the game in 2.5 years. I've been completely out of it, but I'm in town. I might as well go. I'm going to say hi to everybody, like pass the torch on to the next generation of pumpers, you know, kill an afternoon, and then I'm going to go across town and I'm going to play poker all week. And I'm going to make some money. And that was my plan. That was what I was there for. And all of that went completely out the window, because the course of this day went very, very far from what I expected and became an entirely different thing that was Super, super fun, and was kind of influential in getting me back into the game about a year later. So in the time that I had been gone, the difficulty of the game had gone up significantly, but more so, they just expanded the number of hard things that existed in the game besides just Chimera and Final Audition Episode 2-2. We started to have things like Sorceress Elise, we had things like Crash Day, we had things like Vacuum, we had things like Final Audition 2X. There was just a big, wide group of things that were equally as hard as what we had at the very top level of NX. Making this very, very hard for me was the fact that I was sight reading almost everything the entire tournament. I played Crash Day D26 in warm-ups, did very badly, I don't think I finished it, but I just wanted to see it. And aside from that, the only thing I was not sight reading the entire day was when we got a song from NX2. During the warm-ups, as generally happens at these things, everybody was doing really silly stuff, just playing goofy things. And a very strange thing happened that sort of highlighted the difference between the Korean and Korean American folks that were there to try and present the event and, you know, be there on behalf of Endemiro, and the American community, which just has our own ways of doing things. So at some point, Boss Phil is going up and doing warm-ups, and people are giving him the business and yelling at him as usual. So he turns around without losing the stage. He just sort of leans over his shoulder and yells, "Eat a dick," at whoever it is that's heckling him at the time, and none of us thought anything of it. And a few minutes later, we found out that the folks that had come with Endemiro were trying to have him disqualified for that, for yelling obscenities in public, and they just had a very, very big disconnect between how things are done where they're from and how things are done in the US, and it was just a really silly moment, because anybody that's met Bossville knows that that's just what you're gonna get. That's normal. He has a big personality, he likes to be loud in public, and he generally does not actually want to make enemies. He's just like that. It was just a very weird moment. Somewhere during these warm-up proceedings, I get approached by this just college-age dude who noticed that I turn everything for the most part, and is the only other person in the room that is really, really dedicated to trying to turn almost everything. And we just end up talking because that's what we're here to do, is just enjoy Pump and hang out and talk with people. And it turns out he doesn't particularly know too many of these people because he's somewhere in the Midwest and nobody really has a huge community there. But it turns out he's much better than people really knew. It's just that he doesn't know any of the people that are here. Right, so we end up talking, and I think I did my qualifier with him as well. We go over and do the qualifier. They ask everybody to play Chopsticks Challenge S... I want to say it's a 17. It's a 16 or a 17. I can't remember off the top of my head. And it's got a slowdown that annoys everybody. There's a really, really sort of hype moment when Dan Period, I think S's it, and just kind of pops off and sort of goes, yeah, all right, we're here, let's go. And so I went last. Like I said, I think I went with our mystery challenger, and despite not being consistently playing at the time, despite being way away from the game for a very long time, despite literally sight reading this song and having only heard it in the 7 groups of people that have played before me, I get 0 and a good. So of course I have to go pop off back at him. I'm a jerk like that. It was very silly. It was just kind of putting the room on notice of, yeah, I'm here to try and lose and like shake the hand of whoever is going to lead the community, but I'm not going to give it to y'all for free. It was very, very goofy. We get along into it, and then in this next round where we get down to 8 people, we have a big problem. It cuts to 8. And we roll the hardest single chart that's available to us at the time. We roll Crash Day. And then everything goes absolutely sideways. Despite everybody pretty much being excited about playing Crash Day, there are wildly varying, just weird things start happening. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Chadley just has a terrible run. Just bad things happen at tournaments sometimes. He's hardly the only person this has happened to before, but, you know, a top player just has a bad run and gets eliminated. And this is far from the only time this has happened. Famously, a couple of years later, Mr. Clickman had a disaster of missing one step on the devil and just being eliminated because things happen in these tournaments. And that's unfortunate, but, you know, you just go with it. It's the nature of very volatile tournaments. In between the rounds, they do finally get the freestyle going, and after a very American performance of widely ranging, unexpected type of results, you get pretty much what everybody was hoping for the ending. Shionian wins. Brian Ho and his partner come up with what I believe is a third time that they have made second, or at least that Brian Ho has made second at the USPF, which is sort of disappointing given how much time and how much effort he put into freestyling at the USPF. I don't know where he is anymore. I haven't heard from him in years. I think this may have been the last time I talked to him 10 years ago. But he did a lot for freestyling in the US, and it is a little bit disappointing to see him not get huge rewards out of it. But I definitely appreciate him, and I appreciated him at the time. When speed happens, it's not hugely contested, right? There are 4 or 5 people. Herd PvP does have a very strong showing and just puts it to bed. The rest of us are sort of on break, and at this point, we really have to start paying attention to the elephant in the room. Somewhere over next to the machine, there is a table that has been set up, and there is a person sitting there with 2 monitors with a streaming setup. And this is 2011. Streaming major video game events is not a thing. So whoever hired this person and whoever realized that this would be a thing in the future was very, very forward thinking. I don't know if that was somebody on the USPF group. I don't know if that was somebody at the Genesis Arcade. I don't know if that was somebody that works for Andemiro, but whoever it was, they definitely had the right idea in trying to get that sort of thing ahead. You know, get on it early. Get a very forward-thinking kind of jump on the fact that this would be a popular thing later. The problem is that at this point, the only people that really do video gaming streaming are fighting game players, right? There's a lot of fighting game players that do streaming for events, and that is it. Beyond that, you have to be like a top League of Legends player in 2011 to be doing that. So, this person knows nobody here. He knows nothing about the game. He has spent the entire time kind of vaguely saying, oh man, these folks are going real fast, and then name-dropping Justin Wong, showing how much he really knows top streaming personalities. He doesn't know shit about Pump. He's very protective of his setup. He doesn't want anybody else to go over there, and he is very interested in memes. He wants to joke around, and he wants to interject a whole lot of early 2010s kind of meme humor into everything and talk about dicks and scream stuff we pull people off of commentary for nowadays in 2011. And that's pretty much the extent of what he knows, because that's what he does for fighting game streams. It's entirely sensible that he does what he knows. The thing is that what he knows does not fit in this group. So he's slowly starting to make enemies all the way around the room, because we all appreciate that you're trying to get more access to the game, but you do not really fit in the culture here, and it is starting to become a real problem. I think the chat at some point really sort of harassed him into trying to do interviews with some of the players, and I remember just having a terrible time talking to this guy. If anybody knows who that was, I think it would be interesting to try and figure that out later. And, you know, they probably do better, more well-known commentary these days. But at the time, it just seemed very out of place. The stream was cool, the person they had on commentary and the refusal that he had to let anybody else get near the commentary made it very, very awkward. We're ready to get back at it, and there are 4 people remaining in the event. At this point, I have the one fortunate thing that happens to me the entire day. I managed to pull a song that I know. We get Faster Z. It's now a D21, I believe. At the time, it was rated D20. Also, based on scores in the previous round, Diego has to go first. He does a totally fine job. He's not super, super confident on turns, has a little bit of trouble in the freezes, but he puts up a score. Sikraken, the heavy favorite, ends up going behind that, and extreme turns are his weakness. He's there to do speed. He's very good at speed. He wants to get all of the hardest stuff in the pool. Instead, he's gotten a very, very bad chart for him, and he has an okay run. As much as he can do, he tries to deal with the turns. I get to see both of those scores, and I'm familiar with this chart having played on NX2. So I know what I have to do, and even with some weird drops for me, and being a little bit out of shape, I go ahead and beat those two scores. And so the only person behind me turns out to be that kid from the beginning, the guy that came up to me that didn't really know anybody. So I look up what he's labeled as on the sheets, and it says, a guy with a hat. Literally, that's what he put his name as. A guy with a hat. And it turns out that this is also a great chart for him. He also has stamina problems, but he can turn. And this chart is entirely based on turning. So again, going last and getting to see where we are, he also manages to beat everybody and put it down to a final of me and him. He gets to go to USPF and run himself down in the final against a person who's sight reading every chart and hasn't played for 2.5 years. Unbelievable. So we go into a final playing all D23 and higher, for which both of us are completely unprepared. Neither of us has really put any type of work into the new charts that are in this difficulty, and basically the guy that is ready for this sort of thing has just been relegated to the sideline, and he gets progressively more pissed off as this continues. For one reason or another, he ends up going first on all 3 charts, which I think by modern standards is a little messed up. I think I should have had to go first at least on the second chart. But because both of us are having serious stamina issues, it kind of makes sense that they want to give everybody some time to rest, since we're both just getting destroyed by all of this. We get Final Audition Episode 2X, D24, which is a sight read for both of us, and it shows. Neither of us has any idea how to do any of that bracketing stuff. We kind of just try to mash our way through. Both of us get a B, and we have a very, very close finish, where a guy with a hat wins with a better B. It's not impressive. Taking a couple of minutes for us to try and get our brains back together, they roll it and roll what everybody was hoping for. Crash Day D26. I'm better at drills than this guy, so despite the fact that we both kind of make a mockery of it again, guy with the hat gets a C, and I get a B. Neither of us can A the charts, and we are now 1-1 in the finals of the US Pump Fest, getting absolutely obliterated by everything. We roll it again for a final, we get Vacuum D25, which once again seems to be a complete sight read for both of us. It certainly is for me. Guy with the hat just about walks off at the end. He's not at all pleased to be doing 200 BPM bracket drills and runs at the end. So I assume I have this pretty freely, and then I manage to do even worse. Once again, we both manage to pick up a B. I drop a big freeze in the middle of the slow section and just ruin any chances I had to make points. The guy that came here knowing nobody, basically trying to make friends on the fly, sight reading half of the songs, but did turns on the one round when it really mattered, ends up winning USPF without getting an A on any of the songs in the final round. He would later become known more specifically by his legal name, which is Matt Miller. I refer to him as Merp Merpler just because that's what I put him in my phone as randomly when I met him, and I've never bothered to change it. There's not really any meaning behind that, it's just sort of an in-joke, and I've just never referred to him any other way. Over the next year, he would become very much more well-known and has continued to be a community stalwart and a threat in speed tournaments ever since. It's just that the first time he showed up on the scene, nobody had any idea who this guy was. He just kind of wandered up, won USPF, took the trip to Worlds, and went and competed at the WPF 2011. It was quite an introduction. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no point. There's no meaning. This is just a story. I hope you guys had fun with it. We're going to come back and do more of these another time. Bye for now.